All right. Couple minutes. All right, everybody, welcome back to my studio tonight. As a new episode of the live mastering streaming. So tonight we're gonna work a little bit differently than what we've seen so far in my live stream collection. We're going to do something called stem mastering. As you can see on the screen now, I don't have the usual stereo mixdown file where you normally would start mastering from a stereo mixdown file. Tonight we're doing stem mastering, which is something that it's a bit of a variation on the standard mastering workflow. So just to be clear, normally speaking, when you master a song, you start from a pre-master file, which is the mixdown, stereo mixdown of the same song. And we've seen this in the previous episodes. But sometimes you might need to have a little bit of extra control on the mixing side of things. And therefore, you might start mastering not just from the stereo mixdown file, but from a bunch of stems that when you play them together represent the stereo mixdown file. Except you have somehow the possibility to intervene in single or groups of layers of the parts of the mixdown, so to be able to control things a bit more in depth. Now, one note just to be clear, stem mastering is not mixing. Mixing is a practice, mastering is another practice, and stem mastering is yet another practice again. What makes stem mastering different from stereo mastering is that with stem mastering you have access to individual or groups of parts of the mixdown itself. Typical example of stem mastering is when you're mastering a song with vocals and the mixdown sounds good and everything, but after the mastering processing, the vocals might need a little bit of adjustment individually, or the mixdown is fine, but the vocals can be tweaked to get a better result, so you have access to the vocals on their own. In other words, as you can see on the screen with me tonight, this particular mastering session is built around a stem mastering, as a bunch of stem basically. It's a stem mastering session. So again, just to be clear, what is the difference? The difference is that I'm not starting to master from a stereo mixdown file, but I will master out of a bunch of stems that, when you play them all together, represent the mixdown file. This gives us the advantage of having the possibility to intervene on individual layers, like you can see. So to adjust, for example, the mix relation between the parts, to be able to fine-tune stuff in the mix, with the aim anyway, with the intent, with the target anyway, to have a master file at the end of the session. So the end target is always a master file. Now, why would I go stem mastering instead of stereo mixdown mastering? There's a couple of situations I can think about. The first is I require it. As a mastering engineer, I listen to the mixdown, I can pinpoint, let's say, problems or things that can be improved. It would be a little bit difficult to do just starting from the stereo mixdown file, and therefore I request to the artist the possibility to have access to some stems. The second scenario is the artist herself is not so sure, let's say, about the mix, or they can hear things in the mix that maybe don't really go well, and they don't really have either the expertise or the monitoring or a way to fix it with security, so they request the stem mastering as an option. The other scenario that I can think of is, for example, the song is going to be mastered, and we already know beforehand that there are going to be a couple of versions, for example, the instrumental version and the vocal version of the song. So it makes sense also there to start from the instruments and the vocals separated, put them together in the mastering stage, so when you need to render out or produce the master of the instrumental, you just mute the vocals. One note that I would like to pinpoint here is that stem mastering is not mixing. So if I'm stem mastering, I need to keep the number of stems limited. I cannot stem master starting from 50 or 60 layers of mix layers, like sometimes happens. There is a bit of miscommunication maybe between the artist and the mastering engineer, and I agree on the stem mastering, and then I'm presented with 50 layers, and I'm like, okay, wait a second, 50 layers is a little bit, considerable amount of layers. And remember one simple thing, that the more the layers, the more my mind will be divided into handling all these layers, and my focus will be taken away from the actual mastering job, from the actual job at hand, which is mastering. So a limited number of stems does the job, does the stem mastering job normally. And that's why, for example, in this scenario, you can see here that my stereo mixdown file, which is present here on the AB channel, as usually we have a channel that contains the mix as it was before the mastering, so I can always go back and reference to that. But next to that, you can also see that I've got a bunch of parts. The song for tonight is provided by my good friend and awesome producer Lvca, and it's featuring also vocals, this song from Joe. And I listened to the mix and I was like, look, you know what, we could do stem mastering on this one, because I know that I can get a better master if I have a little bit of access to the individual layers, and I can fine-tune and balance a little bit better the individual layers before they hit the mastering chain. As a matter of fact, the way I approach stem mastering is in every fact like a normal mastering, stereo mastering. And then listening to the mix and then doing my mastering process, I will find probably a way to make it sound better when I go and intervene and adjust and I slightly tweak the individual layers. Okay, so let's get started. Tonight the first thing we're going to listen to the bounce, which is here on top. I'm going to label it, I'm going to color it red. So we always have, can visually keep in mind that the red is our stereo mixdown, so it's going to be a reference. And then I've got my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stems. Now notice how the stems are organized in this particular session, which makes total sense in case of a stem mastering scenario. Kick drum on its own, snare on its own, drums, all the rest of the drums grouped in a layer, bass parts grouped in a layer, synth parts all grouped together in a layer, and then the rest I have is vocals. And in particular, the lead voice sits on its own channel because it has a certain importance in the mix, in the overall mix, in the mix picture. So it makes total sense to keep it, separate from the rest. All right, so let's get started first of all, and let's listen to the mix to begin with. All right, cool. So overall, good sounding, good production, sounds tight. Couple of things that I would do just by listening to the mix before we even, you know, start to bring up the level, start to cue it, or also, in other words, before we even start to apply master bus processing. Yeah. By the way, just to be clear, from channel 4 down to channel 11, so this bunch of channels, I'm gonna color them a bit differently so we got a little bit of a better layout. I'll do yellow. So from channel number 4 down to channel 11, these are the stems of the song, and these are grouped all together into a bus. You see, from here we go into bus number 1. Bus number 1 is inputted here, and it comes out from the stereo out. So this represents my master bus. I like to give myself quite some headroom. In other words, I like to give myself a little bit of, you know, gain on the end limiter, because most likely at the end of the process I will add some of the outboard. So to work with a bit of headroom beforehand allows you then to drop in the outboard and have the gain staging done right from the get going. So that's why I loaded up my mix view and I selected all the faders and I lowered the faders by 3 dB all equally. Notice how the kick drum came a little bit louder already from the stem, so I compensated on the fader. So the kick drum is 3 dB softer than everything else, but everything else is dropped by 3 dB, and this means that I've got 3 dBs of extra gain headroom on the master bus. And so the first thing I'm gonna do to the mix, there's a couple of things I wanna do on the stems. One thing that comes to mind is to give the drums a bit more sparkle, a little bit more of dynamic movement. The second thing I wanted to do was to give the bass a little bit more character, I would say, so to give it a little bit more weight in the mix and perhaps open it a bit in the stereo. And last but not least, check the voice, you know, check the vocals and, you know, control a couple of the resonances and filter them and give them a little bit of touch of compression, I would say. But the compression part will come later when we start leveling up things. So the first thing I'm gonna do is, as you can see, I loaded up on my mix window, I loaded up 3 equalizers on the vocals, and I'm gonna check the vocals on their own. In particular in this section, where I think the vocals sounded a touch kind of masked behind the rest of the instrument. So I'm going to start, first of all, to EQ the vocals in a way that they naturally float on top, just by tone. Not even level yet, just by tone, so that the tone of the voice stands up against the other instruments. Let's see from here. One catch when you do stem mastering in Logic is to solo save here, control click on the solo button on the master bus, the auxiliary return that I use as a master bus. So when I mute, or better to say, when I solo things in among the stems, I do here. The solo save function will come in handy later when we actually route things outside the computer and have a channel, you know, like a monitoring channel back, because then that's when you need the actual solo save function. Now, as far as solo save goes and auxiliary return, Logic will take care of it automatically, as you can see. So I'm gonna first of all clean up a bit of the rumble, so filter out the low frequencies. Land into my heart, spin it on my life, so we can dance along again. There seems to be a bit of a, you know, concentrated energy, I would say, around the low mids here. Land into my heart, spin it on my life. I'm gonna control this gently using an automatic, a dynamic equalizer is the Nova equalizer. I talked about this equalizer already in the previous episodes, if I remember well. But this is a parallel equalizer, so it's not a standard equalizer, it's a parallel equalizer, and reacts to the sound, reacts to the input in a particular way. It's a parallel EQ. It helps you to keep the output consistent. Normally with the EQ, if you boost or cut, with a normal equalizer, if you boost or cut, you alter the overall output loudness. Some equalizers have an automatic loudness control. For example, the good old Fab Filter Pro Q3 has an automatic gain control of the output. But a parallel equalizer by design will keep the loudness more or less consistent, so it will rebalance the spectrum depending on what you do with the nodes of the EQ itself. Let me show you. So I could, for example, grab this node, land into my heart, and cut it, land into my heart, and automatically land into my heart. This region of the spectrum around the 500 Hertz, which tends to sound quite boxy, it's lowered in energy, and automatically the rest stands up. Land into my heart, spin it on my love. So if I grab my normal EQ and I cut 500 Hertz with the normal equalizer, land into my heart, spin it on my love. Okay, I'm cutting a lot, so let's say we cut the same amount. For example, we got 60 Bs on this one and 60 Bs on this one. And I solo one or the other. Land into my heart. Land into my heart. You can hear the difference, right? There is certain loss of energy when I cut on the normal EQ, and that's why most of the time when I want to do rebalancing of the spectrum and I want to keep somehow the loudness consistent, or the output kind of more consistent, I switch to the parallel EQ. Besides, this one from TDR sounds fantastic. And it also includes dynamic processing. So let me show you the dynamic processing. I want to cut some energy. Land into my heart, spin it on my life, so we can dance along again. But in those louder parts, as you can see also from the waveform, it gets a little bit bigger there. On those louder parts, I want to also include some dynamic processing. So what I'm going to do is cut 3 dBs here. Land into my heart. Then add the dynamic process. Land into my heart. Spin it on my life, so we can dance along again. And as you can see, when the singer is singing a little bit louder, the dynamic processing grabs those frequencies and pulls down the gain even more. Now, it's all about the timing here, because if you keep the timing short and fast, you will have an immediate reaction, almost immediate reaction from the EQ, which could sound a little bit, not as smooth, I would say. So what I normally do also, I compensate a little bit on the attack time and the release time to get it to ride the signal a bit more gently. Land into my heart, spin it on my life, so we can dance along again. And the difference in the mixes should be already noticeable. So let's listen with the EQ off. And now with the EQ on. And the result is that they naturally, more or less in a subtle way, depends how much you push the processing and how much you need out of it, they more naturally sit on top, so they're overall more audible. They don't get the masking effect of accumulated energy in the low mids, not as much, and this helps to keep them a bit more consistent across. So let's listen from this point now. I was here the whole time. Burning hands, cold-blooded. I found a million in your eyes. I just spent it. also got backing vocals, and I assume they were recorded, you know, by the same singer with the same microphone. So let's listen 1 second to the backings on their own.
I wish they'd fit into my arms, land into my heart, spit out my life.
There's a bit of a p, like a bit of a plosive effect. At this, regarding this, the easiest way is to load this stem into RX and have RX run through the deplosive module. It's just an easy, you know, I say quick and relatively, you know, successful, I say very effective, that's the word. So let's select here and do a, let's just like check this section here, preview.
I wish they'd fit into my arms, land into my heart, spit out
That one.
spit out my life.
So this is without the processing.
Spit out my
Okay, and this is with the processing.
spit out my
Select it all and render it. And as you can see, those areas here that were previously much more yellow, now the yellow in a spectrogram means it's louder. So as you see more yellow, more orange, as you see brighter color means louder. So all those parts here are now gone. Now just to be sure what I also do, we should have done this earlier actually, in fact. I'm gonna quit this, do not save it. Roll back 1 second to Logic. Grab this stem and save it as a new file. In this way, I can always roll back to how the stem used to be. And, you know, should I realize that maybe I exceeded, you know, on the processing, I was a bit too enthusiastic, and, you know, it can happen. So it's always good to have, you know, backup copies. And so we create a new file, relabel it, load it back into isotope RX, and look at this area of the spectrum, the low frequencies with those brighter, more yellow moments like here, and look what happens after I render it. Boom, gone. Because our isotope RX took care of the plosive in that area, is now gone from the file. I save it, close here, and Logic automatically reloads the updated file where the plosive problem is now gone, because I processed it in isotope RX. Okay, so let's see if the lead vocal needs that processing too.
land into my arms, land into my heart, spit it out my life, so we can dance along again.
Doesn't seem so. For now we can leave it. Maybe later on we'll notice and we'll intervene. It takes 2 seconds anyway. So, backing vocals. I was saying, the backing vocals here have a little bit of and filtering to be done.
I wish they'd fit into my arms, land into my heart.
I can go with a gentle filter to roll off some of the lows.
I wish they'd fit into
Let's listen with the lead.
land into my arms, land into my heart, spit it out my life, so we can dance along again.
I think I would like to increase the stereo feeling of the backing vocals by loading up the mighty Lipwing Audio Center one, where I'm gonna simply reduce the center by, let's say, 1 dB and a half, and raise the sides by, let's say, 1 dB.
I wish they'd fit into my arms, land into my heart.
So what this does, it removes a bit of the energy from the real center, and it enhances a bit of the sides by pushing that dB and a half, dB how much I pushed it, dB, 1 dB. But of course, because I reduced the center by 1 dB and a half, now the difference is 2 dBs and a half between the center and the sides. One thing about center one, this is not MS. This is proprietary Lipwing algorithm that divides the true center from what happens to be on the sides. I made a video about this. You'll find it on my stream. You'll find it on Lipwing's channel and so on, where I explain how this works. Very effective plugin, very specific, so I use it for these kind of situations a lot. So now, this together with processing, and maybe we can give the backings also a little bit more volume. Okay, so let's try.
Land into my arms, land into my heart, spin it out my life, so we can dance along again.
Nice. I'm gonna also add on the lead vocals, I'm gonna add Soothe, because it's just a beautiful plugin, and it takes care of those couple of resonances that are here and there. We're gonna just play through Soothe. We're gonna switch to mid-side mode, and we're gonna just intentionally use the delta function to first of all dig through the processing of Soothe to hear what it's actually doing on the signal.
The call is fainting. I wish they fent into my arms, land into my heart.
So I'm gonna EQ the sidechain of Soothe to intentionally push Soothe into the low mid range, and empty the mid-range by introducing a notch filter here that just digs a hole in the sidechain, so Soothe will literally ignore this section of this part of the spectrum. Because I want Soothe to take care at the same time of the low mid resonances and the S and the F and those sharper top part of the voice. And now we disengage the delta and play Soothe by passing it and letting it on and off to hear the difference.
The call is fainting. I wish they fent into my arms, land into my heart, spin it out my life, so we can dance along again.
Soothe is so good, but it can also be very subtle. So something that I do a lot when I use Soothe is to click on the bypass, and to be 100% sure that I'm doing the right processing, I do not look at the screen. So I just focus on my ears, because the screen and what we see can be really deceptive compared to what we actually hear. So be sure that when you make audio decisions, you're not being fooled by your eyes. So close your eyes and listen to bypass on and off. So we start with the plugin on. Actually, we start with the plugin off.
The call is fainting. I wish they fent into my arms, land into my heart, spin it out my life.
Very nice. Soothe is great. It's not super obvious. It's not so in your face as a result, because that's not what we want. We just want to remove a little bit of that cloudy layer, I would call it so. And Soothe is great for this kind of stuff. So I'm gonna copy this processing over, and maybe I should swap Soothe with center one. So I have Soothe process the backings before center one. We solo 1 second and we check what it's doing on the backings as well.
I wish they fent into
I don't think the backings need as much low mid processing as the rest of the spectrum, so I'm gonna quit this node and I'm gonna introduce a filter instead. So I filter out everything but the highs, and I push Soothe into smoothing the top end of the backing vocals.
I wish they fent into my arms, land into dance along again.
Close your eyes and listen to the difference on and off.
I wish they fent into my arms, land into my heart, spin out my life.
Let's focus on that spinning on the S there.
Land into my heart, spin out my land into my heart, spin out my land into my heart, spin out my life.
bit too aggressive, so I'm gonna back off a little bit of the processing. So reduce the threshold depth and adjust the mix, and this should be good to go. So remember, we are not mixing here, we are stem mastering. So my aim is to compensate for issues or problems, or simply slightly adjusting so they sound better, but I should not go and change the tone of the voice. I'm not gonna go and drop a, I don't know, a colorful Pultec EQ on the voice because I want to get that gritty tone. No, this would be an artistic choice. Now, me and Luca know each other very well, so he gave me some freedom under that point of view. So he told me, if you feel like adding effects, if you do your thing, because you know, we trust each other, we have a long work relation. So I might add later on stuff, but this is not yet the moment. First, I want to fix those couple of problems that I heard immediately, and then we're going to go and proceed with actual mastering. So the other thing I wanted to do was think about the bass. Probably also later we'll ride the voice with some gain plugin, you know, to automate the levels a bit. So let me check on those percussions here. Yes, I'm gonna get the drum stem, so the stem that contains all the drums besides the snare and the kick, and I'm gonna give it a bit more sparkle, a bit more excitement. And excitement, generally speaking, means variations in level, dynamic movement. That's what makes us excited, the fact that things are, you know, a bit more dynamically moving. So I'm gonna add a plugin here that's called Sonox Evolution. Super cool little plugin, and the only thing, it basically is a transient designer. There's several of them. There's SPL, there's you can do this with a proper dynamic processor like Multiplicity, for example. But this is just really quick to use, super effective, and another one of those plugins that you just dump in and set and forget. So what I'm gonna do with this is I'm gonna push the transients a little bit of this signal. You can even give it a fake extra compression by pushing the sustain. Or killing the sustain for that matter to give it more impact. But again, we don't want to do too much, so I'm gonna just give it extra 3 dBs of transient and perhaps a bit of sustain, which sounded pretty good. We bypass on and off. And as you can hear, the difference is subtle, but it's all in the feeling. It's all in the fact that you hear those hats and the dynamic movement a little bit better. So it brings that layer from being a little bit more distant from you, it brings it a bit closer, because we feel the dynamic movement more than before. Then what else I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna create a drum bass. So I'm gonna go into my mix window. I'm gonna recolor these channels with a different color. For example, sorry, I have to do it here. So for example, I'm gonna color them, you know, let's say something else. For example, light, what is it, verde aqua, what is like water green. And I'm gonna just quickly bus these to another bus. I'm not sending them to the master bus, I'm sending them to the drum bus. The advantage here is that I can now create a new one. So I'm gonna go here and do option, create new auxiliary channel strip, and call this para comp. Because in this way, what I can do now, I can route these 3 channels here, like I just did, but also here, bus number 2. And then I send both of these to the master bus output, which is bus number 1. In this way, I'm subrouting the drums into 2 buses of the same, which now apparently are the same, But on one of these, I'm going to load parallel compressors, because parallel compressing the drums is always a good trick to get the drums to sound fatter, louder in the mix, and later on will give us a bit of control on how loud, not impactful, but loud, how loud we want the drums to sit in the rest. So on this one, I'm going to load my favorite, compressor for drums, which is typically the 1176 or something like that. Fatso, is another one. As a matter of fact, we should load the Fatso. It's pretty awesome. This one, the Fat simulation from UAD, or we can load any compressor you want. Any compressor you might think it works on drums. You name it. There's so many out there. Every one of us has, their favorite compressor for drums. By the sound, I think I would go Fats, or I would go 1176 on this one with a touch of vintage. Revision E, this one. Bluey. Actually, I want the low noise. I want this one. I want the black one, which is actually this one. Right, here we go. It's not even the black one, this one. So sorry, guys, but because it's unloading the Universal Audio X, but the one I'm used to, it's the where is it? This one. That's the beauty. That's the one. Legacy low noise 1176 compressor. So I'm going to leave them there for now. The bus is going to be off, but as you can see now, I've got this channel here which contains the same drums. And notice that I reroute both of them into the master bus, so I'm sure that the signal path is correct. Drums, drum stems, drum buses, master bus, output, or master out. Okay, so we keep this here, and also what it means that now I can give it some of this cool. And when we do parallel compression like this, definitely don't go gentle. Attack time is very effective to leave some of that impact through, should we need it later. And that's it. Now let's park it there, let's leave it off and forget about it for now. Now, next up is the bass. The bass, in my opinion, doesn't need just level, it also needs a bit of balls. So instead of raising the level clean, I'm going to add a saturator. And the one I like a lot is from SSL. I've got a couple of options that I can think of here. I will try this one first because this will give me just saturation and level. But should I also need a tone change, I can try something else. Let's check the chat one second. With this thing you can give it a lot of attitude, and the more you push the drive, the more it's gonna introduce extra harmonics, color the sound, make it fatter, you name it. So the trick is to find the balance between how loud you want it and how colored you want it. So I can, use both the drive and the output gain to compensate. And listen to the difference in the mix. Without processing. Not bad, huh? So the difference now is that the bass is more audible, it's heavier in the mix, has more core. It's definitely a nice solution. I'm also gonna add some side chaining. I'm gonna do that by using my favorite side chainer here, Pro C2. And I'm gonna get the sidechain key from the kick drum, of course. Here, kick. I'm gonna enable the external sidechain. I'm gonna slightly. Hard knee, because you really wanted to grab the volume every time the kick drum hits without much of that knee action. So hard knee. And range, we can limit the range to something like 1.5 dB, 2 dB, to just be sure that the bass is dipped a little bit, but not too much by every kick drum hit. This without. And it gets nice and groovier. We can maybe add alpha dB or something. The other thing that I hear now is the synths and the vocals, analog synths. Let's listen to this layer. So I want to give to this layer something a bit of a heavier feel, like I did for the bass, but also want to change a little bit the tone of it. So Michelangelo is a solution. This is a tube equalizer, it's emulation of a tube equalizer. Brilliant sounding plugin. So since this plugin came out, has been a little bit of a revelation in terms of what you can get out of in-the-box sound. It really has a certain organic feeling. It responds a bit like hardware. It's a very, very, very interesting plugin. So with this one, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give it a bit of aggression, which brings the tube color a little bit more in your face. And also I'm going to give it some mid and highs movement with the dynamic section of the plugin included here below. Definitely sounds nicer, but also sounds louder. So a good practice is to hit the match button here, which will loudness compensate. Because 5 dB louder definitely sounds better, but it's also just louder. So we want to be sure that it sounds in the right way. So I'm going to reset this to 5 and listen to with and without. Can give it that bit of extra, excitement, half dB and stuff. But on top of this, what I'm going to also do, I'm going to add Soothe again. And this time I'm going to sidechain Soothe from the main lead vocal. Because in this way you can ask Soothe to dynamically dig frequencies away from the synth every time the vocal hits. It's some sort of sidechain like you would do with a compressor. But I use Soothe, which is much more intelligently adapting to the signal. And my aim here is to keep the voice and the synth glued together, but make the voice a little bit more understandable. So I've got a preset here that I made, vocal sidechain. So let's switch off Soothe and listen back to this difference. The idea is that I'm not going to hear the side chain going on, but I'm just going to hear the vocals better. And it's a common mix technique to impose difference both in loudness and presence and at the same time distance between layers, because as our brain cannot really process too many sounds at the same time, you gotta give it a little bit of a help by imposing, by mixing, that things are a little bit, well defined in terms of layering, depth, position in the mix, and so on. So a little bit of soothe helps the vocal to float on top of the synth. The synth don't feel sacrificed because in that moment my brain just goes to the voice. So I'm gonna hear the voice better. So let's also give the bass a little bit of extra stereo. Bass is now a fully mono channel. You see it's a mono layer. So I'm gonna duplicate the whole bass channel. This is another good advantage of having stems. I can duplicate the whole stem and apply effect to the copy of the stem to be able to blend the dry and the wet individually. And on the bass, what works a lot is, a bit of chorusing, like stuff that broads, opens the stereo field. So I'm gonna go and add my mighty UAD Roland dimension thing, dimension D. And, interesting enough, there is not, because there is a process here. So I will have to remove this for a sec. And I will have to add the dimension D now, because then I will have the option to add the dimension D as a stereo, mono to stereo output. Roland, dimension D is in mono to stereo. The reason why I could not load the mono to stereo version of the dimension D before is that I was inserting it in a slot followed by a purely mono processor. So Logic will tell you, no, you cannot add a mono to stereo processor and then follow it up with another mono. So I will now have to replace also the Pro C2, which is no problem, because what I was doing, I was just, side chaining from the kick. So I'm going to copy the settings from this one. I always have this temporary preset, and I can just load it up here. Should be the same. Yeah, looks the same. And then the last thing I have to do is activate the sidechain input from the kick drum. Kick. This creates a chorus kind of stereo thing, but to be 100% sure that I'm only adding stereo information, I will also load up center one again. And in center one, I'm gonna mute the center. So whatever I'm left with is just purely stereo. See? Now I can, with the fader, just decide how much of the stereo thing I want. And we do this in the mix or in the master. It's a nice sounding part. It's a part that works well in the mix, has a nice sound, a nice melodic, so it's worth to give it a bit more value in the mix. Sorry, stereo bass. All right, so at this point, I think I'm kind of done with the various, like mix tweaks. We can focus now on the master stuff. So let's first of all give it a little bit of volume, I would say, a bit of attitude with compression, so the usual mastering stuff. I'm gonna first of all filter a bit, just EQ, add compression, add parallel compression with Dyne 1, and then add level with limitless, and then we take it from there. vocals could use a little bit of extra. Let's see. Yeah, that one was a bit sticking out, so I'm gonna manually, introduce it before suit. Outro vocals, this one were completely ignored on the first passage, so I'm gonna check this real quick.
Blow on the fire, burn yourself, repeat. Blow on the fire, burn yourself, repeat.
Let's redistribute the tonality of these to give prominence to the bass part and declutter the low mids again. Let's see how this works.
Blow on the fire, burn yourself, repeat. Blow on the fire, burn yourself. Blow on the fire, burn yourself, repeat. Blow on the fire, burn yourself.
Okay, from beginning. Definitely time to start adding a bit of automation. I like this, the way the synth starts, and then when the vocal comes in, the synth could drop a little bit. So the best way to do this is to add a little bit of smooth automation in a range of like a dB or two, to keep things evolving over time without quick changes, because quick changes we can detect, but slow changes, dB or dB and a half over a few seconds, our brain will just process it as a change of picture, a change of feeling of the music. So definitely helps. So I'm gonna go and bring in my beloved loudness here, trim gain. I'm gonna add an automation that brings the level of the synths slightly softer just before here the vocals comes in, and I'm gonna just count. Now also you might have noticed at the beginning I set up the tempo. We're working with stamps, so totally handy to have the BPMs locked in, so you can do like grid-based automation, grid-based editing, stuff like that. So I'm gonna basically count. You see this like about 16 bars, and I'm gonna count 8 bars and then start the automation. So my synths drop by a dB by this time. So they drop a dB over 8 bars, so it's not something that we can totally detect, as if it would be a dB change over maybe, half bar.
Burning hands, no
melody kicks in here, so I'm gonna do this other trick here. I'm gonna create a duplicate channel. So you see I just drag and drop the whole thing, lead, and I'm gonna remove literally the waveform except in that point, like that. So again, comes in really handy to be working on grid, because this takes a second. You see where it's on grid, it's gonna be like tight on the spot. So I'm gonna check for the clicks here. Just gonna add a little bit of anti-click thing, and on this side here I'm gonna cut the bass. Now this EQ also has filters. And I'm gonna intentionally use something that opens up in the stereo field, and I'm thinking about the mighty Valhalla delay here, because it's a very effective, very cool delay unit, this one, and you can tweak it a lot. So I'm gonna go lo-fi. Let's see, one of these modes, for example, I can go quartz, let's say, sync it. I'm gonna have it so it opens on the stereo field, which means then I'm gonna have to have it 100% wet, spread over. In frequency, so I just leave a little bit of what I'm missing on the sides, which I'm gonna be able to decide when I listen to it with the original channel together. Listen to the difference when this one kicks in, and after we blend it with the fader. This is the advantage of doing this process, which is splitting channel, adding effect, and then blending it with the fader. You can really add just what you need. Automation quick on the fly to get the tail going. Notice how my suit here is still sidechaining from the voice, so I can increase this sidechain here to get it a little bit, you know, with a bit of a stronger action. Notice how I just added a quick Valhalla feedback automation at this point. Remove touch mode and listen back to this transition. I'm not sure that I'm going to actually do this, but using a channel like this gives you a quick way to grab, for example, a segment, bring it up, and have it automatically, don't copy, open up there in the stereo field. This is something And that, you know, creatively speaking, I would check with the artist, check with Luca in this case, and, you know, like get it going. But it kind of helps a little bit to get that backing vocal a bit more audible. Section where the voice is fading out and the lead synth is coming back, I can fade in this clip. So we'll slowly, progressively come into the mix and open up in the stereo field again, because remember, we got that effect going on here, the Valhalla delay. So let's listen to this part. Outro vocal here needs also a bit of work. I'm gonna add something like also I'm gonna add let's see how Evolution behaves here with vocals, because I'm missing a bit of that articulation, I think.
Blow on the fire, burn yourself, repeat. Blow on the fire.
Except I don't need it on the body of the voice, but I need it on the treble, on the part that makes it a bit more audible. So I'm gonna add, instead of Evolution, I'm gonna add, what's it called? Here, DMG multiplicity.
Blow on the fire, burn yourself, repeat. Blow on the fire, burn.
So to isolate that band and add, this time, instead of compression, I'm adding upward expansion.
Blow on the fire, burn yourself, repeat.
Let's listen if it makes a difference in the mix. Definitely does help in that section. Here in this section needs to be progressively brought up, and nothing works better than just plain volume automation. So I'm going to add another loudness here, control, add loudness trim gain, and just, you know, gently bring it up so the last bit of this repetitive part here stands out by, let's say, dB.5 to start with, and see what happens. Burn yourself, repeat. Blow on the fire. And we're pretty much done, as a matter of fact. Now it's time to start comparing a little bit to how the mix sounded and see if we're on the right track. This thing on the drum, so let's gate slightly my dry sound. So we make them sound overall tighter, but then we add parallel compression. In this way I can control how much impact I want from the drums, as well as how much weight and loudness I want from the same drum channel. So especially in this section where everything is full on, we can balance it. Snare, I'm gonna give it this cool trick here, which is my cool Pultec mid-range, because the snare can use a little bit of that extra, you know, the edge, you know, what makes it a bit, I don't know how to explain it in English, it's kind of funkier, I would say. Last but not least, I want to add a touch of compression to the vocals with the mighty Lvca, just for the tone. I have my preset, sorry, not this one. I have it here on my Stream Deck. Where is it? Lvca Silver. I've got a preset that I made so that when I load up this compressor, there is no compression going on, and there is no gain change. Because the thing that I noticed that every time you load the Lvca, it kind of fucks up with the levels, you know. So I made a preset so when I load it in, there is not much difference. So then I can start tweaking it. Go in the busy part of the voice, so we're sure that we're not over compressing. So carefully, we need to balance this carefully.
So we can dance along, yeah. So we can dance along. So we can dance along, yeah. So we can dance along, yeah.
Okay, these ones need to be a little bit de-essed. You can see how they pop out. I'm gonna do that just in a controlled way. So I'm gonna add a preset that I made on Multiplicity, which is called Peak Sketcher. And what this thing does, it just does that. It just very quickly grabs the transients. So what we're hearing now, the delta, the different function, this is what the processor is doing, is grabbing those louder portions of the signal. They're a bit more offensive to the ears, and it's just keeping them under control. Then difference off, sol off, and check it out. Tone of the whole mix now seems to be on the sharp side. I'm just going to compensate with this EQ. The area of the spectrum that when there's too much energy there, too long sustained, gets to your ear. So you know what, at this point we can also drop in a little bit of the outboard chain because we are at the end of the session. So I'm going to switch cameras here. So we got a little bit of the outboard, and what I'm gonna do now, that's why I kept quite some headroom here. I'm gonna disengage the limiter, create a new channel, which is gonna be my print channel, and then on this one I'm gonna dump the limiter. So in other words, what's gonna happen is that everything that before this point was in the box stays in the box, but the last bit goes out into the outboard gear. And it means that this is going to go out of physical outputs of my computer, my interface. It's going to run through the outboard, and it's going to come back in here. And I just want to be sure that I'm clocking properly. Yeah, you should be clocking from the converter that you use to capture your sound, unless of course you have one of those fancy master clocks that clocks the whole studio, but a bit debatable there, because a lot of designers say that the best converter will have a really stable clock built in. So that's the one you want to use to capture the built-in clock of your converter, especially if you're talking about a really high quality converter like I'm lucky enough to own in my studio. So here we go. So the signal path now is everything in the box comes out of the master bus. The master bus goes through the outboard, and it gets captured back in the computer where I've got my limiter. So the sound that we're going to hear now is going to be through the outboard. let's double check what's happening here, because there's a lack of low end. Of course. I was like, forgot the solo thing on, so we're listening to just that band. I was like, oh shit. So this is, we forgot to unsolo this. I got lost into the explanation. So bring back the limiter there, root out of the master bus, capture back in, and off you go. To do now is to do this operation of 4.4 kilohertz dipping, you know, to like reduce the energy. We want to do it with the hardware EQ. So I'm going to bring in the hardware EQ. So EQ off. EQ on. So normally, when you get the mix right, when you adjust it right, when you get the gain staging right, when you get your limiter to push at the end, and then you add a little bit of this extra with the outboard, generally I can get a really loud sounding master, yet tight, balanced, full, vibey, and so on. Now, just to conclude, I want to let you listen to the difference between the, with and without outboard. So I'm gonna do is I'm gonna duplicate the auxiliary channel strip, and I'm gonna route these from the same bus. I'm gonna copy over the plugins, and I'm gonna send this to a different output. So we're gonna be able to literally A/B it. Let me just show this one here. Yeah, forgot to add the soft saturation from the converter, that's why I had to push the level so much.
I was here the whole time.
So now the difference is going to be subtle, but the whole point here is not to determine whether the in-the-box mix is better than the outboard gear, just to appreciate those differences. Because trust me on this one, it's not a guaranteed fact that if you run through the outboard you can get a better result. Not at all. Like several times I'm surprised how actually in the box you can get things to sound really, really good to the point that that's it. And some other times switching to the outboard gives you a bit of extra and a bit of extra magic that might make sense, you know, to use it. In this particular case, the most difference is introduced by the Anamod, by the tape simulator. So let's switch back to the computer now and check it out. So this is going to be my in the box. And this is going to be the mix running through the outboard.
I was here the whole time. Burning hands, cold-blooded. I found a million in your eyes.
Again, this section of the song with the voice from the like in the box.
Burning hands, cold-blooded. I found a million in your eyes.
Now the same through the gear.
Burning hands, cold-blooded. I found a million in your eyes. I anticipated. The call is venting. I wish they fed into my arms, blending to. The call is venting. I wish they fed into my arms, blending to my heart, spinning on my life, so we can dance along again, so we can dance along again, so we can dance along again, so we can dance
Alrighty, so kind of done. I will print this now and then close the stream. Tomorrow we'll give it a fresh listen, leave the gear on, so probably do a couple of retouches, but this is about it. So before we conclude, stem mastering versus normal stereo mastering. Stem mastering, as you can see, gives us a lot more possibilities. But one thing is that it's easy to get lost a little bit into the mixing side of things. So definitely I approach stem mastering as if it was a master. So I would listen to the song and those first initial adjustments that I might think to apply with a broadband stereo EQ, with a stereo EQ, with a broadband compressor, you know, I can now do them with a bit more detail inside the stems. So get the pre-master basically to sound a bit tighter, a bit more controlled, and a bit, and pinpoint those problems that you might hear, and then proceed with mastering. And then the mastering part is basically as a stereo mastering, because I could also, for example, just grab these tracks and hide them and forget about them and think about just the stereo sound, because this is about, mastering at that point. So, hope everything was clear and inspiring, and thank you for following me. And I will now let the song roll. I will print without the end limiter on. I will just listen through and print it through the outboard gear. And right after that, I will stop the streaming, okay? So, again, thank you for following me. Hope to see you soon on the next episode. And let's go.
repeat, 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 repeat. repeat, 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 repeat.
And let's go. All right, thanks again, guys. I'll see you on the next episode. And cut.